I've been thinking a lot about expectations. In our youth, we have expectations of what our future lives will be like. As we get older, we have expectations of what we want from life, whether it's interpersonal, personal, professional, whatever. When I was a kid, my mother expected me to do certain things around the house. My father expected me to excel in certain academic areas and make certain choices, which I did not make correctly, as most children don't. But I, in many ways, didn't live up to their expectations, but I lived up to my expectations. I lived the life that I wanted to live. And it's this sense of expectation that whether they're personal expectations, family expectations, societal expectations, cultural expectations, financial expectations, that word expectations has become a bane of my existence across the board. I just don't know what to do with it, because in many ways they're unattainable. And I don't know what to do with that. I want to be able to have a goal that I can exceed at, excel at, to, really be the master of that thing. But life expectations and sort of pressures often get to all of us. Like when you're doing really well professionally, maybe you're doing really horribly personally. When you're doing, vice versa. When you're artistically, really finding your voice, maybe financially you're not doing very well. Like the problem is trying to find some sense of balance. Allowing pressure to get to you. I'm talking about you. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about me. Allowing pressure to get to me and having it affect everything. Trying the thing that I've been trying my most in my adult life, probably even since my 20s, to do is find balance. There's like, I have this theory. I will talk about a lot of theories in these videos. I have a theory that the three things, well, there are probably four, but I like the idea of a triangle. So the three things that artists and creative people want the most is time, space, and money. Now, realistically, I think everybody in the world, regardless of profession, probably wants time, space, and money. But time, space, and money are of the utmost importance. And there's a bit of a hierarchy on that. Like, I could do with less money, but more time or more space. And then number two would be more money, and then more time. Like so there's even within that triangle, there's a bit of a hierarchy of like what's the one that's gonna be like, oh God, if I had more of that. And that's where I come to making this video, because while being creative is an incredibly rewarding thing by itself, part of it is also connecting to others. I mean, when I make a piece of art, I want to show it to the world. I want the other people to engage in it. I want other people to appreciate it, sympathize with it, empathize with it. I want that expression that I'm trying to share to be felt by the viewer. So we all want some form of acceptance. That's a given, because if we didn't, we wouldn't make something creative, A, and B, we wouldn't put it into public for the possibility of acceptance or ridicule, because those are pretty much the two things that happen. So putting your stuff out into the world makes us very vulnerable, because we're, more or less sort of bearing our souls, or bearing our inner thoughts, or our inner concerns or ideas or perspectives on the world. And if people agree with them or don't agree with them, that can be very So the point being, trying to find connections to other people, trying to find a tribe, trying to find that lack of not solidarity, lack of aloneness. So my idea for this set of, I guess they're vlogs, will be trying to share what's in my mind, what I do, why I do it. After 30 years as a practicing artist, what have I learned or experienced? I'm not doing it in a tutorial kind of way, because I'm not here to teach you how to do your thing. I'm here to just tell you how I do mine, or why I do mine, or what trickle down impacts have had over my life that have led to something, in the hopes that you might learn something. If you do, that's amazing. If you don't, not really why I'm here. But mostly because I currently feel very isolated and alone. And so I'm doing this as an outreach idea to try to make it so that you don't feel quite so alone. So maybe we can connect about that. I don't know how all of this works, and I'm not sure if an online connection is enough to feel not alone. But regardless, I want us all to try to find our tribes. I want to find my tribe, and I'm not sure if this is going to work, but if I don't try, then I fail. So this is my attempt, and I hope you enjoy it. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is one of the definitions of insanity. I'm sure there are other definitions, but that's sort of the one that most people sort of latch on to, so I'll just go with that one. I do love talking about things, so the problem is I like conversations. I don't like one-sided statements and theories and ideas. Because if I just sit here and continually say my ideas, well, my ideas might be wrong. Well, many of them are probably wrong, but it's one of my issues with sort of social media and all that is the amount of people who are not professional at something sort of giving their opinions. Like, I grew up in an era where you trust doctors because they have their PhD. You trust, I don't know, professionals in their fields because they have degrees in these things, not because they have the most followers or the highest priced advertisers and do the most sort of sales content. Grew up in an era where merit was thought to be one of the best things, like the biggest things, most important things, like being a professional in your field and in your industry was the thing that brought you, call it, I don't know, respect, fame, fortune, whatever, but respect is really what it brought you. And I feel like that time has kind of passed in most industries. I mean, maybe there are still some industries that is true in, but merit was one of those things that I always hoped that the arts industry was all about. Like, when I remember having these conversations with my dad and with my professors about how quality of art should be paramount, should be the most important aspect of a career. And they used to always sort of laugh at me, like, "Oh, you naive young child." And now I get it. Yeah, I was absolutely naive, and I still am a little bit to that. Like, I wish that was still the truth. I wish that was real, but it's not. And maybe it never was. So there is that sort of aspect of it. Was it ever about merit? Again, I kind of wish it was. I hope it was. But the reality is it probably never was. And it's unfortunate because I sort of based my career on the idea of if I make the strongest work, whatever that sort of, if I make the most evocative, the most interesting, the most unique, the most progressive, the most whatever term you want to put to it, like that was the thing that was going to make me stand out. And now, in sort of, I don't know, hindsight at this point, since I'm now 50, that's not true. That's not how the industry works. That's not what people want, which is a very unfortunate realization to come to later. I mean, it really is all about connections and friends. Which is so sad, but it's the truth of the matter. I mean, we all knew it. I mean, I grew up in Washington, D.C. with politics and all that, and so, like, I knew connections were important and all the things that revolve around connections. But I always hoped that the arts was different. Maybe I even went into the arts because I was like, no, the arts is different. The arts is about expression and uniqueness and having that interesting and different perspective and people appreciating and respecting that difference about you versus the other people. They don't. Not really. They might say they do. They might even act like they do. But they don't. The industry's still a bit. The industry's still a lot about making connections with the right people, being in the right place. Like, we used to always joke about the way to succeed in the arts is the same as basically succeeding in any other industry, which is be in the right place at the right time with the right pitch. You know, be at the right place in the right time with the right artwork or the right idea or the right perspective or whatever it is, and talk to the right person. And there you go. And that's how that works. So, unfortunately, that's true. And unfortunately, that's basically just gambling. You know, it's just a hope and a prayer, which I'm all for. I am an adamant believer in a hope and a prayer. Being in the arts and creative industries is pretty much all about a hope and a prayer. It's what we sort of base our careers on. Because if we didn't hope and pray, what's the point? Like, it literally is. Nobody goes, you know what? I'm just gonna make my art for myself. And I have no intention of ever being appreciated or respected or whatever you want out of your art, your creative enterprise. Everybody wants something from what they make. When you make art, the purpose of it is to show it to other people. I mean, if you kept it in your home and you never showed it to anybody, the question is it actually sort of a piece of art that is impactful in society? Like, does it have any impact in society if nobody ever sees it? Which is an interesting dilemma that I remember having a conversation. Well, not a conversation. I remember having a debate with this guy, the University of Iowa, back in my undergrad. For years, every time we saw each other, we debated that topic. Okay, I say years. I was only there for 2 years. So for 2 years, every time I saw this guy, we debated this topic. You know, so like, if you don't show your art, does it have meaning? Is it art? I don't know the answer. Still don't know the answer. I mean, there's some great works of art, I'm sure, in the world that have never seen the light of day. But does that lessen them in any way? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. Does it mean we should stop producing these things? I hope not. I mean, just the sake of making things, I think, is a legitimate endeavor. So what am I doing right here? You're watching me fold this image. What am I doing? Right now, I'm thinking about all of my life experiences and all the effects of them. And so, like, every time I fold this, it's like it represents an experience, an interaction, whatever that has affected me in some way. Sometimes positive, sometimes negative. It's not like every single fold I have a particular story behind, but I feel like life becomes more complex the longer we live. I'm sort of hoping it simplifies later, but at this point, at 50, it's becoming nothing but more complex. And so, like, each line is like a different memory, a different thing that happened that has scarred me, because a fold has scarred this paper in a way that it'll never be undone. It's eternally going to have this mark, much like all the experiences that I have in my life. Like, hopefully I don't forget them and they stay with me. But I'm trying to look at the complexity that happens here. Like the more we do, the more we experience, the more things that happen in our lives. Because it's at one point I was building and building and building, creating more and more complex photographs. I was designing wardrobe, finding locations, like all this kinds of stuff to go with my imagery. And I sort of got to a point of when is enough? When is enough? I mean, like, I can build and build and build and build and build. When can I stop building? When can I stop constructing? And that's what I sort of got to, and that's where this set of work began, which was trying to deconstruct it all. Like, how much did I really need of all this? Was it all necessary? I don't think it was. But maybe it was, because I wouldn't have gotten to this point of this work had I not sort of gone to the excess of the other end, which is probably a pretty apt sort of thing of my life, is extremes. Sort of like you go to the extreme of one in order to find the reason why you did that thing, and sort of go too far, basically. Like, I go too far in one direction in order to know why you have now chosen to go the other direction. Because one of the things that I find in the arts, but also in life in general, really, is like knowing why you make a choice is almost as important as making a choice. So the knowledge of why I'm choosing to do XYZ, I like to know that, because I like to know why anybody does anything. But a lot of times when you hear other people's choices of things, it's like, oh, you know what, I'm doing something similar to that, or yeah, that affected me in the same way, and you feel heard, you feel listened to, you feel appreciated, all these good terms that people love throwing around. But yeah, when I started doing this folding, it was very minimal and selective in sort of where I fold. I wanted to be very strategic and intentional and thoughtful. And now I'm to the point of, I feel that, again, sort of going to excess, going too far, and then trying to figure out how to bring it back ends up being one of those more beneficial exercises. Going over the top, doing too much and too many, because it's the connectedness that I see. Just like in the arts world, boy, everything comes back to the arts industry, doesn't it? But just like in the arts, everything is connected. So by overdoing this, I then offer myself too many options, basically, to play with. And I don't need to play with all of them. I can make, 100 folds or more, and maybe they're all good, maybe they're not. And I can choose to use them or not use them. Just because they're there doesn't mean they need to be used. So that allows me a little bit of sort of freedom to choose to do or undo. Wow, I have to say, this is utterly random. Kind of enjoy it. Bit of catharsis just saying these things out loud. A lot of people say, oh, being an artist and making art is like a solo thing. And it is in many ways. This is my personal vision, unique sort of perspective or whatever on the world. But if I want to get this stuff out into the world, if I want to exhibit my work and sell my work, I need other people. And so other people are of great benefit and necessary for a successful career. So having that support network of people, a group that you lean on, rely on, or just hang out with, is of the utmost importance. It's like I keep thinking about the future. There's a problem, thinking about the future is always detrimental. But thinking about the future, in the past, there were movements, artistic movements. There was, the Dada, the Impressionists, or whatever. These people that defined an era and all this kind of jazz. And because of the pure gluttony of work that's available for consumption in the world, the future is really going to be very difficult for art historians to be able to define a discernible this or that kind of movement, statement, time period, expression. It's going to subcategorize actually a lot of people and things in so many ways that are unforeseen at this point. It's going to be crazy. But it makes me think about, where do I fit in all that? Or even do I fit in all that? I'd like to think I do. But in the end, it's not going to be up to me. It's going to be up to the art historians to decide whether or not I fit into any of these canons or any of these aspects of the industries. As much as we'd all like to control our narrative, unfortunately our narrative is not always within our control. And sometimes it is. Most times it's not. But sometimes it is. But if you control your narrative, you end up being thought of as a controlling person, or a control freak in some way. Like, so there is a point of, like, you don't want to over control, because then it becomes contrived. So you want that soft touch of controlling, but not too much, because people don't want to feel manipulated. They want to feel appreciated, and they want to feel engaged, and as though things were their choice. Not that they were in any way sort of influenced. Which is ironic, since influencers are some of the most important people in our world these days, but people don't really want to feel like they've been influenced. I really like this paper. It's this Langton, because it cracks on the folds. That's a very fun effect that not a lot of papers do. Most papers just literally fold. But to have a cracking happen is very interesting. But plus the texture and the weight of this paper is just sumptuous. Thoroughly enjoy it. Langton. Talking about the timing, like being in the right place, the right time, and with the right thing to say, and all that. I often wonder, was I at the right place at the right time? Like, did I miss my chance? Did I not get there? Did I do it right? Have I missed my chance, or is my chance still coming, or is this my chance? Like, I don't know the answer to that. Probably never will. It'll only be recognizable in hindsight, sadly. But it's an interesting question of, like, would we even recognize our opportunity if we saw it? Not sure I would. Like I said earlier, like when I started this, I felt that the folds needed meaning. Much like my podcast, much like this YouTube channel, much like everything. Like I felt like everything needs to have a meaning and a purpose, and sometimes the purpose is a supporting thing. So it's not the thing. It's an in addition to, or in support of. Sometimes the thing is not, every action does not have to be an attack on the king, like in chess. Like, sometimes you can just do things that have, I'll call it, less meaning at the time, to be clear. So, like, at the moment that you do them, they have less meaning. But that doesn't mean they have less meaning. It just means at that moment they have less meaning. And maybe with time and distance and wisdom, they'll have a more impactful meaning. But sadly, we don't know until that time has passed whether or not it was important. So you just make choices and make decisions, and you roll with them, with the hopes that you've done the right thing. which hope is a word that has become incredibly important to me, because when you combine career, so like I'm going to differentiate, like, so I'm a teacher, so I'm going to differentiate teaching as a career from my art career, and then my personal life, so that would be, you know, spouse, friends, that kind of stuff. And then there's also your artistic career, different careers. So I have two careers, some jobs, then expectations. Oh boy, expectations. That's I hate that word, expectations. Okay, fine. Hate might be a bit of a strong thing for it, but I hate it. It's caused me such grief in my life, for sure. My mother, it all started with, my mother had expectations that I would be the dutiful son, because at the time my brother was a bit difficult. He was recently, at the time, he was diagnosed with bipolar, manic depressive, whatever term is appropriate now. But so I was sort of obligated to become the extremely dutiful son to compensate for the fact that their other child was not as they had hoped. And so I was expected to take up that mantle. And then later in life, now 50 years old, my brother dies on me, dies young, and leaves me with the role of taking care of our elderly parents. So now those expectations have, well, quite honestly, manifested that I'm now expected to take care of my parents, which I, you know, in many ways, I can barely take care of myself, much less take care of my parents. At least that's what my wife would say. But all joking aside, I take care of myself just fine, but I could always do better. But, you know, we can all always do better. It's not the question of what can we do better. It's well, I guess it is the question of what we can do better. It's funny, when I was thinking about making these videos, I'm looking at everybody, all these other YouTube slick, voiced over, polished, you know, lit, and all this stuff, which are stunning. But I'm not that. So I'm not going to do that. And that's where I am now. It's just, I'm a guy who makes things. I just make things. Like, I'm constantly making things. So in that way, so sorry, this paper is really loud. I'm constantly making things. So I'd rather not put too much time and attention and effort into things that are sort of not my thing. Like, I am not a videographer. I am not a influencer. I am not a filmmaker even. I'm not any of these things. But I am a person who has a lot of experiences that would like to share some of his experiences so that they're not lost to the ether. It's funny, thinking back over my life and even thinking about the nature of, like, creating these videos. I know a lot about myself, and I know enough to know what I don't want to be. It's not to say I know what I do want to be, but, like, for instance, like, when I'm making these videos, I don't want to be an influencer. That is not my purpose here. I don't want to be somebody who concerns myself with about likes and followers and trying to get Patreon members. I want to be somebody who uses this platform as a somewhat altruistic, not altruistic, that's the wrong word, but like in a way where I'm just trying to connect with people without it being about commodification or money, or my wife's going to kill me for saying this, but like, you know, I don't want it to be about money. I want it to be about the sincere sharing of ideas. If any of you have any topics that you want me to think about, I'm always up for new topics to think about. I have more than enough. I've got a whole list of topics, but unfortunately I'm not following any of my list of topics. I'm literally just talking off the cuff here while I'm making my work about sort of a train of thought of like just what's in my mind while I'm working, which may be great, may be horrible, only time will tell. People, you know, I've often hear about like people thinking that artists and creative people are sort of hoarders, like we just keep stuff, we have things around, and I'm like, yeah, they're necessary, because at any given moment I might suddenly go like, oh, you know what, I really want to work with oil pastels, and if I don't have any oil pastels laying around, that's quite a pain in the ass to then go, okay, well, I gotta go buy some and go find it and then do this and all that. Like, having the resources, I wouldn't say like laying around, but available, makes life so much easier in so many ways. So having too much in the studio of stuff is never a bad thing, as far as I'm concerned. If anything, I mean, in some ways it's a burden to have all this stuff, but in other ways it's quite freeing, because you can come up with any idea you want, and you have the resources to do something with it, and that's an amazing opportunity. I like that. So one of the things I learned doing this is that because this is a watercolor paper, it soaks up the first touch really intensely. So I find that if I were to like put a paint down first as the first layer, that whatever that mark is, that first initial mark, will become absolutely sort of overbearingly important. Basically, I can't. It'll become so intense that I can't overpaint it. It'll become the mark that will shine through everything. So because of that, and because I want there to be a series of layers of effects and different textures and different brush strokes incorporated, I choose to seal the work, basically. Like, so I'm putting down a first layer of this stuff. Don't know what it is. It's what's available here. But basically it's a matte medium, gel medium, matte, but it's matte finished, because I like to have that characteristic that I'm going to continue to work with, because the finish, the glossiness or non-glossiness, the matte, the satin, that has become something that is, well, it's always been important to me. I mean, I remember being very picky about my printing surfaces, even in the darkroom back at the Corcoran. But now it's kind of become a little bit of an obsession for me, because they have an impact. They change how a viewer participates in the image. The difference of the surface itself either invites the viewer in or reflects back and sort of keeps them at a bit of a distance. Like I love the new glass that's now available, the sort of non-reflective glass that's available. Like, wow, this stuff's so good. I've seen it in museums for decades, but it's finally sort of available / affordable in the market. So it's amazing. I love it so much, and I wish I could go back and sort of redo all of my frames that I did for the past 30 years with this glass, because it's so good at minimizing the reflectiveness. Like, it really elevates the way that the viewer can participate and engage in the work in a way that I always disliked about sort of works under glass, because presentation is a big part of the outcome and the engagement and the participation of the viewer, as far as I'm concerned. The having I always call it appropriate presentation method. There's no perfect, there's no right, there's no wrong. It's just the appropriate one for what you want to show or say or encourage people to engage in, or whatever you want with that. Yeah, now that I've thought about it, there's absolutely no reason for me to be doing the white borders, because they're going to become black anyways, so I'll let those seep in. So it's kind of just a waste of the medium. But anyways, back to what I was saying. Yeah, presentation is very important, and part of presentation, like in the case of this layer of sort of a protective barrier to the watercolor paper, makes it so that I have a little bit more control over how I want the viewers to engage in it. Because glossy has its place, matte has its place. None of them are right or wrong, but in my case, I personally prefer the sort of more matte surface, mostly because it's a nice base to work off of. So like it's, for lack of a better word, it's a neutral base. It's not a thing. There's no, it doesn't inherently have anything. It's matte, it's flat, it's just a nothing. It's an unreflective, sort of remarkable surface, and so therefore it lends really well to then sort of choose to build things onto. And I like that a lot, because, well, my work is all about like layering things onto. So yeah, if I start it, also there's the issue of viscosity, which, thank you, Dick, for that knowledge back in grad school. But the nature is like, glossy surfaces don't take additional layers very well. They often will sort of just flake off. It's like putting acrylic over oil. Like, it just won't work well. So there's reasons why, matte surface has a bit more tooth to it. It has a little bit of a texture that sort of creates that matte finish. And because of that tooth, it takes the next layer better. It bonds to it a little bit better, no matter what surface the next layer is. So it's, because like, if you put gloss over gloss, those actually will, generally bond pretty well. But if you put matte over gloss, it might not bond as well, or vice versa. So what the matte offers is sort of just an endless set of opportunities to be able to put anything I want over it. And so therefore I generally work with a matte finish when I'm working. And sort of in the end, as sort of the final set of layers, that's when I'll make my sort of final decisions of what actual finish I want where in a piece. Because at that point it's literally like the last finish. It's the final layer. It's the thing that's going to be the way people see and engage in it. So, and to a certain extent, it's pretty easy to put a final whatever coat of matte or gloss or whatever onto something. It takes one and maybe three layers to get a really nice sort of glossy finish, let's say, or even a satin finish. And that's normal. But it's that availability of choice. That's what I want, as long as I can possibly have the choice. There will be a point where I won't be able to have that choice. So I have to suck it up and just be like, oh, okay, I gotta put that on the surface. So, yeah, leaving choice for as long as possible, I find to be a beneficial part of the process. But sometimes limitations of choices also is great. For instance, this medium. I love this medium. It does a great job. It's also the only real medium I have available to me easily that I can go to the local art store and pick up. There's endless amount of brands and stuff in the world. But this is available easily. When you run out, you want more. You don't want to have to order it and wait on it, and sometimes you can't plan for it because, like, I didn't know I was going to be making 2 new pieces today, so I didn't know I was going to be making or using this much of this today, so I couldn't have ordered this in advance, kind of thing. But on the other hand, I could have just ordered a shit ton of it in advance and just have it sitting around the studio. But that implies having an endless budget, which, none of us really have. Well, okay, fine. Some of us have, but not enough of us, let's say. If we're lucky, we have long careers. And a career, like technically a career would be that's a charged word in many ways. Because, like, when I got married, my wife is Czech. When I got married, even though I'm a professor teaching art, because I don't necessarily make my primary income from my art, her culture would refer to what I do as a hobby. And I felt incredibly insulted by that for a very long time, and I will never let her forget that she called my artwork a hobby, ever, because, again, I find that very insulting. But that being said, the different cultures sort of appreciate art in very different ways that is very, to a certain extent, is like subjective for the region. Like I was in the United Arab Emirates, and they love their tradition, their traditional motifs, and their traditional materials. They really, really love. And then, of course, they loved the over-the-top, super elegant, expensive stuff. Like these were, and anything that could combine, let's say, like gold and diamonds with traditional motifs was really, really desirable. Yeah, but that kind of thing wouldn't go well in, let's say, the Czech Republic, or even in certain areas of the US. Like, you put together a thing that was about like being Southern and you made it out of gold and diamonds, like, yeah, that may not go so well in the South. Like they're not about gold and diamonds. I mean, so art and its appreciation and its engagement, unfortunately / fortunately, has a lot to do with the context of not just like where is it produced, but where is it intended to be experienced and seen and appreciated. So, like, I never fit in the United Arab Emirates because I generally don't work, with traditional motifs, and I don't. I mean, yeah, I use gold, but like I use it sparingly. and I use it sort of as a more of a gesture than as the intention. So because I don't fit their sort of oeuvre, there are things that they appreciate basically. Then I'm never going to be sort of as accepted there as I would like. When I was a kid, I always thought that I'd be accepted in Europe because even when I was young and at the Corcoran and I would make my stuff, people would be like, "Oh, you do really well in Germany," that kind of stuff. And maybe I would have done well in Germany at that time. But the thing is time changes everything. So maybe my work would have been incredibly well received in Germany in the early 90s or let's see, no, was it Corcoran? Late 90s, early aughts. But I wasn't there. So when somebody says, "Oh, you might be appreciated in this place," that often also means this place now. So like, don't sit on those ideas of like, "Oh, so and so region or culture would really appreciate what I do," because those appreciations, those engagements, they change over time, much like just like the general wave of popularity of different things in the arts world. There's times when photography is at the forefront. There's times when painting is at the forefront, or sculpture, and it all has to do with whatever else is going on in the world that has somehow impacted people's perception of things. Whether that's like good economy, bad economy, lots of space, not a lot of space, all kinds of different things can impact things. I mean, well, that's like the UAE again. They loved huge work, like really, really big work was always appreciated because they had tons of space. So you make this massive work for a UAE client that basically can't be really put anywhere else because pretty much there's nowhere else in the world that has that much space and money. So scale is another aspect of creating work that has its sort of regions and again has its times. So there are times when big works are really impactful and desirable, and then there are times when big work is not desirable and people want more intimate, small, personal works. There's no rhyme or reason to when and why, and you just have to make what you make, and more or less, sounds horrible when I say it like this, but like make what you make, and more or less you have to wait for the industry to catch up to you. Now you might be you might be ahead of your time, you might be behind your time, but everything swings back around in and out of favor. So if you're ahead of your time, buoy for you. I think that means good for you. We'll go with good for you. If you're behind the time, just be patient. The time will come back.